Hello, this is David Benheim from Excel Consulting, and in this video I'm going to show you some error handling functions in Excel. Most of these are only in the newer versions, but that could mean a version that was released 10 years ago. So let's get started. The first one is something to handle errors. It just basically replaces an error value with something else. So if here I have a growth no error. So these divide by zero errors are very tricky and annoying, and you can very easily get rid of them by using if error. With if error, you just have the value, which is whatever you want. So the value in this case is going to be subtotal divided by this one minus 1. And then comma, if it's an error, I'm going to return 0. So there you go. It just returns 0 if there's an error. And otherwise, it just returns the same thing that I would be getting otherwise. There we go. So really simple, really easy. It handles divide by zero errors, but actually it handles any Excel error. If this is, say, equals to the cell here, but then if I break this by cut and paste over here, I'll get the common ref error, and the if error will ignore that as well. Notice that it's not always advisable to ignore those kind of errors. In fact, it's mostly advisable to use it for these divide by zero errors and occasionally for the NA errors for lookups. All the other errors, if error is not going to be useful because it's just going to actually hide that there's a problem. But definitely use it for these divide by zero errors. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to teach you is formula text. This is a very simple one. Equals formula text, and then just the place where your formula is. It just basically shows you a text of your formula instead of that. It is of course dynamic like any other Excel formula, so if you change that, it will change. You can drag them down, and they're just really useful for seeing what the formula is. Alright. So the next one we're going to do is called Aggregate. And Aggregate fixes three main problems with the sum formula, as well as with other aggregation formulas like count A or max or min or other ones like that. And here they are. So firstly, if data is filtered, and here we can see that I have filtered this to only include Jim, I'm hiding row number 6, and that means that my sum, which is supposedly the sum of these two numbers, is showing me 17. But that's only because there's a filtered value of 7. So obviously it does show me now. But very often you want the sum to exclude anything filtered, anything hidden, etc. The second problem with the aggregate formula, something that if error fixes, is that a sum does not ignore a error. So here's what I mean. If you have a sum of these values, if there's an error anywhere in this chain of the sum, that follows through. That follows through. That's the same with any Excel formula. Apart from this one exception and a couple of other exceptions, an error will follow through, which can be really annoying, particularly if, say, you want to find an average of growth or something like that, and you do have these divide by zero errors that aren't actually wrong, but they cause problems. You could fix those with the if error, as we already saw, but here is another way to do it. The third problem with the sum formula is subtotals. Let me take off these filters, equals sum. So if I decide I'm going to put a subtotal here, not realizing that there is a grand total down here, then that is going to double count the issue. So here I see it's going to double count the one up there. So there's one magical function that fixes these three things, and that is called the aggregate function. Aggregate is over here. So let me add back the filters, and then I can see here, I can write equals aggregate. Then you get the options for what you want to do. Sum is number 9, but you get all these 18 options. So you can type number 9 or double click it, and then you press a comma and you get these options here. And you can choose what to ignore. You can ignore hidden rows with 5, ignore error values with 6, or ignore, this is basically double counting. I'm going to choose number 3, which is ignore hidden rows, which includes filtered, error values, and nested subtotal and aggregate functions. So back here I'm going to type number 3, comma, and then I get to the array, which is just basically the same thing that I would do in a normal Excel. So let's say that I want to add together all of this. I'm going to start at V4, like that. So I've just, in my last input, just done what I would do for a sum. I've had to change it manually there because my filtered version doesn't quite work. As you can see, I have 24. And 24 will be 30 if I take that off, because it will be 6 plus 7 plus 13 plus 4, that will be 30. I can drag this across, so I can see that it excludes hidden or filtered values. It also excludes errors. Here I've got an error very clearly, and it excludes that. The final one is double counting. On the basis, it does not exclude double counting. However, it excludes it if previous ones are using the aggregate or the subtotal function. So if this was changed to equals aggregate 9 for sum, comma 3 for ignore everything, and then just add these 3, then that aggregate in turn will ignore the error value and the other things. And what's more, this one, which sums up, including the subtotal, will only add up the 4, the 7, and the 6 to be 17. So it does ignore previous aggregate and subtotal functions, but if someone wrote in a sum, unfortunately it doesn't ignore that. I wish it did, but it doesn't. Alright, last thing I want to show you is, it's not its own function, but it's a trick that not many people know, and that is the debugging function. So if you double click a cell, or if you press F2, you get the formula that appears with all the linked cells. But here's what you can do. You can select each one individually and press F9, and that will convert that to a value. You can press a group of cells like C4 over B4 and press F9 again, and that will convert it there. So we see that that's where our error comes from. You can select this bit, F9, or absolutely anything you want. You can even select the whole thing, F9, and that will convert it to a value. Important thing though, instead of pressing enter, you should press escape. Why? Because enter will convert it to whatever fixed value you had at that state. Let me press Ctrl Z to get back to that. Again, I can select here, F9. Now you can select these bits for example, but it's got to be as part of something. So if you select that and F9, it will not really evaluate it because it's just discontinued like that. Remember, press escape and then you don't lose your initial formula. Great, so that's what I wanted to show you there. We had formula text, if error, we had aggregate, and we had the debugging F9 trick. Thanks for watching.